We had heard the stories before we even set foot in the forest. They weren't just urban legends, they were warnings. Warnings disguised as campfire tales, whispered among hikers and locals. They spoke of a place deep within the woods where strange things happened. Hikers who entered and never came out. Pictures taken of nothing, until you looked closer and saw something standing in the background. And then there was the YouTuber, famous for debunking true scary stories. He had spent 3 nights out here, live streaming his investigation. On the 4th day, he stopped responding. His camp was found, his gear abandoned. He was never seen again. But we weren't scared. We were content creators, hungry for real horror stories, desperate for viral content. Our channel, Dark Explorations, thrived on uncovering true encounters with the paranormal, and this was exactly the kind of legend we needed. A subscriber had sent us coordinates, claiming they led directly to the location of the disappearances. We laughed it off at first, but the more we read about the forest, the more we needed to go. It was the perfect mix of chilling real-life stories and the unknown. 5 of us packed light, cameras, extra batteries, thermal scanners. We parked miles away from civilization and hiked in. At first, it felt like any other forest, dense, overgrown, the scent of damp earth filling the air. But as we moved deeper, something changed. It was too quiet. No birds, no insects, no distant rustling of animals, just the sound of our own footsteps crunching against the fallen leaves. "I don't like this," Shane muttered, tightening his grip on the camera. We ignored him. This was exactly the kind of setting we needed. The tension, the eeriness, the perfect true crime and horror backdrop. And then we found it. A clearing, unnaturally circular, as if something had carved a perfect shape into the wilderness. In the center, a pile of ashes, charred, scattered, deliberate. And just beside it, half buried in the dirt, a single shoe, too small to belong to any of us. No one spoke. The weight of something unseen pressed down on us, thick and suffocating. Then our gear started malfunctioning. Cameras flickered, refusing to focus. Batteries drained at an impossible rate. The temperature dropped so suddenly that our breath curled into mist. But we pressed on, adrenaline masking the unease crawling up our spines. Then, in the distance, we heard it, a branch snapping. We whipped around, flashlight scanning the darkness. Nothing. Then another snap, closer, and then a whisper. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't leaves rustling. It was a voice, indistinct, just on the edge of hearing, garbled, like a broken radio transmission. Shane's breathing quickened. We should go. But before we could move, we saw them, figures, tall, shadowed, standing between the trees. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, but then one of them moved. Not like a person, not like an animal. Wrong. A jerking, unnatural motion, as if its limbs didn't quite work the way they should. Panic set in. "Back to the trail," I whispered, gripping my flashlight like it was a weapon. We turned, only to realize the path was gone. The trail we had followed for miles, the only way back to safety, had vanished into the undergrowth. The forest had changed, and then the whispering started again, louder this time, surrounding us. The shadows between the trees began to shift, moving closer. Something cold brushed against my arm. I spun, but nothing was there. Shane swore under his breath. "Run!" We didn't need to be told twice. We bolted, crashing through the underbrush, lungs burning, legs aching. The whispers chased us, the shadows twisting and stretching, reaching. The further we ran, the deeper the forest seemed to go. And then, a light, flickering, distant but real. We ran toward it, our last chance, our only hope. As we broke into another clearing, the air shifted. The whispers stopped. The figures were gone, and before us stood something that hadn't been there before. A cabin, small, wooden, a single light glowing in the window. Relief flooded me until I saw Shane's face. He was staring at the cabin, his expression twisted in confusion and fear. "This is the place," he whispered. I frowned. "What do you mean?" He swallowed hard. "The missing YouTuber, his last video. This is where he was when the stream cut out." The light in the cabin flickered. Then, slowly, the front door creaked open. The invitation arrived in an elegant black envelope, sealed with red wax. Emmeline found it waiting on her desk after returning from lunch, her name written in delicate cursive. no return address. Inside, a letter printed on thick, luxurious paper. Congratulations! You have been selected for an exclusive complimentary stay at the Grand Rulano Hotel. Your experience will include fine dining, spa treatments, and a night in one of our world-class suites, all free of charge. We look forward to welcoming you. She should have been suspicious. A free night in a five-star hotel. No mention of how she was selected, but curiosity and the promise of a lavish escape was too tempting to resist. That evening, she arrived at the hotel, a towering structure of dark stone and stained glass windows. The doorman greeted her with a deep bow, his face partially obscured by the brim of his hat. Inside, the lobby was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers, velvet drapes, a grand piano playing softly in the corner. A man stepped forward to greet her. "Miss Emmeline," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Welcome. I am Henry Holmes, your host." Something about him unsettled her. Maybe it was the way he never blinked, or the way he held her hand just a second too long. But she forced a polite smile, allowing him to guide her toward the grand staircase. Her suite was exquisite. Marble floors, antique furniture, a canopy bed fit for royalty. A silver platter of wine and chocolates awaited her, a small note tucked beneath the glass. "Enjoy your stay." The unease prickled at the back of her mind, but she ignored it. Maybe she was just overthinking. Then she noticed the mirror. It was large, stretching from floor to ceiling, but something felt off about it. As she moved, her reflection seemed a fraction of a second behind. She stepped closer, pressing her fingers against the glass. Solid, just a mirror. Still, she felt watched. Later that night, she awoke to a sound, a faint hissing. She sat up, heart pounding. The room was silent, too silent. The air felt heavier, thicker. Her lungs struggled to pull in air. Then she realized gas. She stumbled out of bed, reaching for the door, but it wouldn't budge. Locked. Panic surged through her. She banged against the wood, screaming, but the walls seemed to swallow the sound. The mirror, her gaze snapped back to it, and her blood ran cold. There was a figure standing on the other side, not a reflection, someone inside the mirror, their hands pressed against the glass, their mouth open in a silent scream. And then she was gone. Not a single trace of Emmeline was ever found. The next morning, her suite was spotless. The bed was made, the chocolates remained untouched, and the invitation waiting on someone else's desk. It started as a harmless invitation. Patrice was one of my co-workers, an older man, maybe in his mid-40s, quiet, polite, always keeping to himself. I worked in a sterile lab, a place where socializing was minimal and conversations never went beyond small talk. But one afternoon, out of nowhere, he approached me. "I heard you like urban exploration," he said, his voice calm, deliberate. I hesitated. I had mentioned it once in passing, maybe weeks ago. I didn't think anyone had been paying attention. "Yeah," I said slowly. "I go sometimes." His smile widened, but there was something about it that made my skin prickle. "I know a place you'd love, an abandoned mine just outside town. No tourists, no security, completely untouched." I forced a polite laugh. "Sounds cool. Come with me," he said, "this weekend." The way he said it, it wasn't a request. It was an expectation. I brushed it off, making an excuse about plans, but he didn't let it go. Over the next few weeks, the invitations became more persistent. He'd leave printed maps on my desk, send links to old articles about the mine. Then came the messages. "It's perfect for photos. You'd love it. No one will bother us there. You should really come alone." That last message made my stomach drop. I started avoiding him, taking different lunch breaks, leaving work a little earlier. But Patrice didn't stop. His messages grew stranger, more demanding. Then one night my father called. "Who is Patrice?" he asked, his voice tight. I froze. "Why?" "He called the house," my father said. "Said he was your friend. Asked if you were free this weekend." Cold dread crawled up my spine. I had never given him my home number. That night I blocked him. I reported it to HR, and for a while I thought it was over. Then a few weeks later, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A news article. Patrice had disappeared, vanished without a trace. His car was found near the old mine, but there, Was no sign of him, no footprints, no belongings, just an open entrance to the cavernous tunnels. Most people assumed he fell, got lost, but I knew better. Because before he disappeared, he had sent me one last message, just 3 words. You should have come. I met Lucien in my early 20s. He was the kind of guy who always seemed distracted, like he was listening to something no one else could hear. At first I thought he was just eccentric, maybe a little paranoid. But the more I got to know him, the more I realized something was wrong. Lucien saw things, not just shadows or shapes in the dark. He saw people who weren't there, people who, according to him, had never been there. I can tell when a place is haunted, said one night, his fingers tapping restlessly against the table. Not by cold spots or creaking doors. I see them. I laughed it off. Yeah, what do they look like? His expression darkened. They don't always look dead. That shut me up. We were renting a cabin in the countryside for a weekend. The place was old, but charming. Thick wooden beams, antique furniture, the kind of place that felt frozen in time. The owner warned us that the house had history, but Lucien didn't need the warning. The moment we stepped inside, his face went pale. We shouldn't stay here, he muttered. Why not? I asked, already annoyed. He didn't answer. That first night, I woke up to find him standing by the window, staring out into the darkness. His hands were shaking. What's wrong? I whispered. There's someone outside, he said. I looked. There was nothing but trees. No, he insisted. She's right there. I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. Who? A woman, he whispered. She's screaming. I heard nothing but Lucien. His breathing grew shallow, his eyes wide, with something I couldn't name. The next morning he refused to go near one of the bedrooms. Someone died in there, he said. That night, curiosity got the better of me. I searched online, sifting through old articles, and I found it a murder decades ago. A husband had killed his wife in that very room. Her body was never found. I felt sick. Lucien didn't sleep the rest of the trip. He just sat there watching the walls, listening. And on our last night, just before dawn, he turned to me, his voice hollow. She's still in the walls. I never should have gone hiking alone, but I'd done it 100 times before. Long treks through the mountains, the silence of nature as my only companion. It was supposed to be a simple trip, a weekend away from everything. No phone, no noise. Just me and the endless expanse of wilderness. I'd been walking for hours when the storm rolled in. Thick, heavy clouds swallowed the sky, turning day into an eerie twilight. Rain started falling in sheets, the wind howling through the trees. My map was soaked, my GPS useless. Then I saw it, a small wooden cabin, nestled between the trees like it had been waiting for me. Relief flooded me. I didn't care if it was abandoned. It was shelter, a way to escape the cold, the rain, the growing unease gnawing at the back of my mind. The door creaked open easily, the interior dry and warm. A fireplace sat against one wall, though there was no wood, a table, a chair, and on the opposite side a single bed. But what caught my attention were the pictures, dozens of them, covering every inch of the walls. Portraits of faces, men, women, children, all smiling. Something about them made my skin crawl. Their grins were too wide, their eyes too dark. The longer I looked, the more I felt like they were watching me. I told myself it was just my imagination, just exhaustion. I locked the door, curled up on the bed, and forced myself to sleep. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up. Something felt wrong. The air was heavy, the silence absolute. Even the wind had died down. Then I realized it. The room was brighter. The portraits, they were closer. I scrambled back, my breath hitching. No, not portraits. Windows. There had never been pictures on the walls, just glass. And outside, pressed against the glass, were faces, grinning, watching. I didn't think. I ran. I slammed into the door, sprinting into the darkness, rain soaking through my clothes. I didn't stop running until I saw the sun rising. When I finally made it back to town, I told the locals what I had seen. They exchanged uneasy glances. "There's no cabin out there," one of them said slowly. I felt my stomach drop. I turned back toward the woods, my heart pounding. Somewhere in that endless stretch of trees, I knew they were still watching, and I knew that next time they wouldn't just let me leave.